Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Momentum. I'm your host, Big Les, joined again this week by NRLW, former player for the West Tigers, played a little bit for the Steelers, and currently at the South Sydney Rabbitohs, scoring tries left, right, and centre. Sophie Curtain, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me on again.
No
Always
worries.
nice to catch up and talk a little bit about the men's footy every now and again.
Sure is. Talk to me, obviously, at the Bunnies at the moment. Me and Jake sort of brought it up on the podcast a couple of weeks ago when you'd signed over there. But you and your sister are both over there at the moment. How's everything going? What's it been like compared to NRLW? Because I was speaking to your sister pre-recording and she was saying it was a bit more professional in the NRLW compared to what this is. Talk to me about the difference there.
I mean, across all of the Harvey Norman teams that I've been at, not just at Souths, at Steelers, at any other club that I've played at previously. There's obviously a different standard compared to NRLW. We're looking at the times of training, the expectations of training and fitness. Obviously, I guess the commitment that you have to show based on the level and the expectations of the staff, but also the finances and the payment and things like that. Obviously, it's still trying to improve professionalism every year. But obviously, there's still quite a large gap between the two. Rabbits have been very good. We're coming, I believe, we were second on the weekend, but I think with some other wins, we might still be in the top 4. So we've played 5 games so far, and we've won 4 out of 5. One loss to Panthers, but as I said, still doing well. We beat the undefeated minor premiers of last year on the weekend, which was nice. So beat Newcastle, which are another, I guess, NRLW aligned club. So they're quite competitive every year. So our goal, obviously, make finals. They just missed out last season. I believe they were one short of making finals. So definitely their goal this year is to make finals. And as I said, with some experience with myself and Emily and a couple of other players within the squad, hopefully we're able to get them there.
All right, team, let's get stuck into some NRL news. The first one, Jerome Luai. He has been linked to the Parramatta Eels off the back of all the Tigers drama. Let's get stuck into the full situation. So from what it sounds like for me, outside looking in, a couple of different stories that have developed over the last 48 hours. Jerome Luai obviously had signed with PNG a couple of weeks ago. It sounds like the relationship between Jerome Luai and Benji Marshall isn't at its strongest off the back of PNG signing, and that's pretty obvious too. Like, you've had a guy that was, pretty committed to the West Tigers, still is very committed to the West Tigers. He's a competitor, Jerome Luai, and I'm sure that he wants the best for the team that he's currently playing for, and he's going to put everything in for the Tigers as well, towards the back end of this year before he does end up leaving. But obviously, the club has made the decision to say, look, go and look for opportunities for next year, because we can sort of survive and sort of move towards the future of the club past 2026 without you in the plan. So, look, it's a tough one. Jerome Luai, he's a full-time premiership winning 5'8". He's a really great player, Jerome Luai, and he did bring a lot of players over to the West Tigers. The May brothers, obviously Talon and Terrell May, obviously looking to go over there and play with a star like Jerome Luai. Api Koroisau has been a big part of that as well since he's been over there. You've obviously got guys like the Finey brothers as well who have gone over the West Tigers. So it seems like, outside looking in, that he's brought a lot of talent to the West Tigers. The prospect of being coached under Benji Marshall, again, has a little bit to do with that too. But what they've built over the last 2.5 seasons has been incredible, and the recruitment's been insane. Obviously, the retention over the next couple of seasons, the next 18 to 24 months, will be really interesting, because it does seem like things are boiling over a little bit, and they've got to extend the Fainu brothers, Samuela and Latu, and also Sione, who are over there at the moment. The May brothers as well. They've obviously locked those guys in now till 2029, I think it was. But just obviously locking in those pieces. Dream Bullers re-signed. So there are some positives in what the Tigers are doing there at the moment. But they've definitely got a little bit of ways to go, and I guess part of that is obviously freeing up some money by unfortunately letting Jerome Luai go a year early. Jerome's a great player, as I said. I think it'll be interesting to see what they do post-Jerome after this year, if they go and back in a young Latu Fainu, give him the 5'8 jersey. Maybe that's a part of his negotiations. Maybe he grabs that 5'8 jersey at some stage. You've also got young Javon Andrews in reserve grade. You've got Jock Madden, who's been filling in there quite a bit, and him and Adam Doueihi have combined well at stages throughout the year too. So what they decide to do post 2026 will be very interesting. But I'm sure that Jarome Luai is going to be very committed to that West Tigers team right up until he does walk out the door at the end of the season. Now, speaking on Jarome Luai and where he could end up, it will be interesting to see what that looks like for him. At the moment, Parramatta seem to be the front runners there, according to Fox League. Parramatta are in the box seat to sign Jarome Luai. I think it'd be a great move. It seemed like the pretty obvious decision when we heard this report initially drop a couple of days ago. Parramatta did seem like the most likely option for Jarome, just with him being with a half that he's played with, but not only that, two really good halves in our competition. Moses, obviously Origin, and, for a little bit of a stage, I think he's played 1 or 2 games for Australia, Mitch Moses, but, representative halfback, one of the better halfbacks in the competition at the moment, Mitch Moses. He is definitely someone, not only that Jarome Luai has a combination with currently, but those two as a pairing can do a lot of damage in the competition. I do think that even though it is for a year, Jarome Luai going over there, you're in the premierships business at the end of the day and you want to win comps. I think that getting a guy like Jarome Luai over to the Parramatta Eels certainly helps their chances potentially, going into finals again, and obviously going deep into those finals as well. They've got a side that can be in and around grand final contention. It's Junior Paulo's last couple of seasons. So too Mitch Moses, really. He's 32, 33 years of age, so he'll want to get a competition under his belt too before he eventually hangs up the boots over the next 5 or so years. So I think Jarome Luai can be maybe a little bit of a helping hand to that, at least for next season. They can go as well as they can go with guys like Iongi out the back there at fullback. If the hookers through, from now until next season and throughout next season, if they can develop to the point where, they're playing really good footy as well and helping guys like Moses and Luai, giving them good service, putting them in the right spots, I think that's going to be a very dangerous side going into next year. We sort of said the same thing about Pezzett, but Pezzett was a guy that was coming into first grade and showing glimpses. We already know that Jarome Luai's proven. He's won 4 premierships. He's one of the better 5'8s in the competition. And what he is known for, especially at his Penrith days, is taking pressure off his halfback. You saw how much pressure he took off Nathan Cleary's shoulders while he was at Penrith. Those two had built up a bit of a tandem, albeit that they played with each other when they were younger. They obviously play with each other in the lower grades, but I think that those two as a tandem can be really, really good together, Luai and Moses, and Luai can take pressure off Moses as well, and they can both play a bit of footy. Luai is really good on those short sides too, so I think that both of those guys are going to be a really good pairing together. Luai is definitely more of a natural 6 as well, where it feels like when Pezzett's been in that 5'8 role, he's obviously gone into his halfback pocket, and it's sort of conflicted when Moses and Pezzett have been in there at the same time. Whereas, Luai is that more natural 5'8, and as I said, he's really good at taking pressure off his half as well. So I think that halves pairing would work really well. I've heard that the Wallabies have been thrown up, going over to rugby union, playing in the World Cup, maybe playing with a Waratahs or one of these sort of sides for a season. I don't know if Luai has too much of a rugby union background. I certainly haven't heard anything to suggest so, but might be a good opportunity for him. It's something in your career that you don't usually get to see or get an opportunity to do. Especially, being in the rugby league space and how big the World Cup is over in rugby union. Only a handful of players have really had the opportunity to go over to rugby and have success there as well. Going over for a year, Jarome Luai, there won't be too much expectation on him, I don't think, going over to rugby. He's a rugby league player through and through, going over there only for a season before coming back and obviously playing for PNG. There's not too much expectation on Luai as well, so he can go over there, have a bit of fun, and then come back. I don't mind it too. I'm not so sure what the dollar figure looks like to go over to rugby union for him, but I think the rugby CEO said that he was very welcoming to Luai potentially coming over for a year and contributing to the Wallabies side, which would be very interesting to see if he does get a spot in that team as well, because it's starting to get quite better, especially over the last year or so. That Wallabies side is looking pretty good. You obviously get Marky Mark going back into that side. You'll have Angus Crichton in there as well, so there'll be some familiar faces for Jarome. Suaalii will be in there as well. It'll be interesting to see if that is the decision that he makes. I think he will stay in the game of rugby league. In fact, I'm pretty certain that he'll go to Parramatta. More rugby league, I guess, talkings. I think that one that has been spoken about a little bit is the Rabbitohs. Him going over there and obviously sitting in for a year, depending on what Cody Walker decides to do at the end of this season, whether he does retire or keeps playing on for next year. I'm pretty confident that that Cody Walker will continue on playing, and I think that report has died down a little bit with Cody Nikorima coming into the frame as well. So I think that it will be Parramatta if he does. Obviously he will be going to a club next year. He'll have to find a spot for 2027. I think that the Parramatta Eels will be that spot, partnering up with Mitch Moses for a season and trying to chase a premiership there at Parramatta. Bronson Xerri, he's obviously going to the Melbourne Storm next year. It's a 3-year deal to 2029. Love this move for Bronson Xerri. It's obviously been rumoured for a while that he'd be potentially making a move to the Melbourne Storm. I think it's a perfect fit, and it's one where I think the Melbourne Storm will really regret losing. The Bulldogs will really regret letting Bronson Xerri go. I think that he's one of those guys. He's a super talented player. Think back to his Cronulla Sharks days a couple of years ago, back in 2020 or 2019, before the ban, obviously. He was killing it. He was the next big thing. The bleached hair over in the Cronulla side. He was absolutely killing it at wing at centre. He was going to be the next big thing in rugby league. Obviously, the ban comes in. He has to go and work on himself for the next couple of seasons. He comes back in for the Bulldogs after working his ass off to get back into an NRL side, and he killed it for the Dogs. And I even think at the start of the year with Vegas and everything like that, he was actually still playing good footy, and I'd even argue that Bronson Xerri's been a top 5 at least player for the Bulldogs this year in regards to his consistency when he's come into that team. It just seems a little bit like a fractured relationship outside looking in between Bronson Xerri and the club. Not too sure what the situation was there. Definitely don't want to speculate too much, but I seriously am so excited for Bronson Xerri in a Melbourne Storm jersey. I think that you could definitely look at Bronson Xerri as an Origin smoky next year. I think that he will up himself to those heights. With how hard he worked to get back into the NRL, I feel like he'll definitely suit the Melbourne Storm culture and what they're about. And we'll find out very early if that's the case too. But I think that with Bronson Xerri too, you look at that side for Melbourne next year. You've got Jermaine Asako coming into the building. You'll have Xavier Coates back at a stage next year. So you'll have those two wingers, Bronson Xerri and potentially a Jack Howarth or one of these other guys in the centres. All of a sudden, you've got an outstanding looking back line for the Melbourne Storm that can compete, where the last couple of seasons, in particular this year, they've really struggled with that depth there, and it's chopped and changed, and the defensive tendencies and just the defence on their edges this year has been quite poor. So I think that they will be very happy to have a guy like Bronson Xerri, a star outside back, coming into that roster. As I said, I think that he'll level himself up to be a bit of an Origin smoky going into that Melbourne side. I think that's the calibre of player that Bronson Xerri is, and if Craig Bellamy can get the best out of Bronson Xerri, what looks like Craig Bellamy's potential last year of coaching, I think that that's going to be an unreal 12 months for Bronson Xerri. I'm so excited to see what he looks like in a Melbourne Storm jumper. And that's pretty much it for news. They're not. Cameron Munster, speaking of the Melbourne Storm, Munster, he's going to be out for the next month or so. The news wasn't out when we were talking with Sophie last night on the podcast. But yeah, Cameron Munster, he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. I'm not too sure if that was an injury sustained from State of Origin footy or what that was there for Cam, but wishing him all the best in his recovery. It sounded like it was a medial ligament in the knee. He had to get surgery on it, so 4 to 6 weeks there for Munster. You'd have to say that that's Melbourne's season done, with Munster coming out of that side now for the next 4 to 6 weeks. Jerome's had a couple of little niggles and injuries that he's been in and out of the side. Harry Grant's only just regularly coming back into the team now from Origin duty, so it's going to be a really tough next couple of weeks. They obviously have Wishart coming into that 5'8" role, you'd think, before he obviously heads off to Perth and potentially plays a similar role. But yeah, it's going to be a tough next couple of weeks for Melbourne. I think that, as I said, probably mathematically now that they're done, they have to win 6 from 7 games. I think they were saying on the Matty John show last night. I just think without Munster, it's going to be a lot harder. Suafa-Longo is a talent. They've got some good players in that roster, and they are capable of winning a high number of games. But the draw post this round for Melbourne is pretty grim. There's a lot of top 8, a couple of top 4 sides in there. So I think that is Melbourne's season done and doosted this year. Super unfortunate for the Melbourne Storm. They're a good side, and I think next year they're going to be better for the run as well. They'll have a little bit of fire in the belly. Back-to-back grand final losses, and then obviously not even making finals. There's going to be a lot of fire there. It'll be potentially Craig Bellamy's last year coaching as well. So I think that this is going to light a fire under Melbourne. They're going to come out of a really strong season next year with some new recruits. Hopefully Xavier Coates back at a stage next year as well. They're going to have a really strong side. And some younger guys have been developed now as well. You think about the Roosters back in 2021 where they had to throw a bunch of younger guys in, your Butchers and all these sort of guys. They're regular first graders now in that Roosters team. So hopefully a similar sort of thing with Melbourne where they've had to develop a couple of these guys like Tui Malado-Brown, obviously the winger there for the Melbourne Storm. They've obviously got Cooper Clark. They've got Atavalu Lasardi, who obviously came in last year, but he's been more regular in first grade other than the injuries this year. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head as well. Who else? You've obviously got as well Stanley Hewen's had a couple of opportunities there as well. Hopefully he gets some more game time. Jack Hetherington, they've got in that roster now as well. He's had a couple of games here and there. Would love to see him get some more opportunities. They've just brought over Oren Keeley, who's a good player too. So they're going to be a lot better for the run, Melbourne. I think that they will have a strong season next year with a bit of fire under the belly after this year's, I should say, demotion out of the top 8 chances. Yeah, well, look, it's going to be interesting when the crunch time hits. And then Souths are trying to get in for 28, I heard as well. Are you excited for the potential chance of getting back into the NRLW hopefully sometime soon?
Yeah, of course. And I mean, I don't know how, I guess, evident this is outside of the NRLW world, but the Souths are actually a feeder for the Warriors in the NRLW in 2026. So who knows, it might come sooner rather than later. Working hard in, obviously, Souths to potentially earn a spot sometime this season. But if that doesn't happen, as you said, they're pushing for a spot in the next year or two or in the next expansion. I believe they're one of 3 teams that are pushing for an expansion. So whether it's Souths, Penrith and Dolphins are the 3 teams that are kind of gunning for the 2 expansions in 2028 when the new CBA starts. So fingers crossed Souths get a go. But as I said, it's very much out of my hands and up to the NRL, I guess, in terms of geographics, finances, pathways, and previous success within, obviously, the pathways. So hopefully if we can make finals this year and come away with a premiership, that puts South at the front of the 3 teams. So yeah, fingers crossed we'll get back there sooner rather than later. Well,
I'll tell you what, if you keep scoring some tries, it might come sooner rather than later too, Soph. Awesome to hear. Let's get stuck into the NRLW. Obviously, the game of the round that you've picked for this week is the Broncos and the Sharkies. Talk to me about this one. What were the highs and lows and some standout players?
Oh, mate, there was a surprisingly close game. So after looking at, I guess, the previous performances from the Sharks having lost to Newcastle in round 1, I wasn't sure how they were going to come out. They were either going to be complete opposites. They were going to come out firing, or they were going to come out a little bit rattled from the first loss. But it actually ended up being quite a close game compared to what I was expecting. So that's, I guess, good that it was a closer game. Firstly, I don't know how Cronulla always get the home games. They've had, for the first 2 rounds, they've had 2 home games on a Thursday night. So both of the away teams obviously travelling, so from Newey and then from Queensland as well. So very lucky there to get some home games in at Shark Park. Now I think it's called Ocean Pines Stadium. But I reckon from the rumours that I've heard, they're looking to no longer hold NRL games there anymore. So, Ocean Protect Stadium. So I think that might be why they're trying to squeeze in as many games as they can there, because I don't think they'll be able to do that too many more times in the future. So Broncos, as I said, defeating Sharks 22-16. There were a few standouts, but just something that I'd like to mention as well. A massive milestone for Ellie Johnson, who played her 50th game in the NRLW. Continues to be, I guess, one of the competition's most consistent middle forwards. Obviously, 50 games in the NRLW is quite a lot, and it takes quite a few seasons to get there compared to, I guess, the men's if you're able to play consistently. But, I guess the first few years, Mulch, she maybe have flown under the radar. Definitely has come out shining in the last probably season or two, having played for Australia and New South Wales on multiple occasions. And I guess the Cronulla Sharks making the finals every year, bar their first year in the NRLW in 2023. So congrats to Ellie Johnson on 50-year games in the NRLW. But back, I guess, into more of the team review. As I said, it was quite a close game, but Sharks just ill-disciplined, just gifted Broncos field position. And looking at, I guess, the key strike players that they've got within their team, it's something that you probably should be avoiding, particularly with the likes of Southwell, Upton, Jager Ferguson, Ali Brigginshaw, and some other standout players within the Broncos attack. You just can't afford to have them in your end too often. And I think that's probably what led to the downfall of Sharkies. Another standout performance for the game was Tamika Upton. So she scored a triple, I think, and she ended up becoming the first NRLW player to score 50 tries. So she was able to do that in only 52 NRLW games, which is a massive achievement. She's an attacking powerhouse, regardless of where you are on the field. So whether you're obviously in good ball, she's scored tries from her own end, middle of the field, loves a a short side play, and can just pop up anywhere. So definitely one of the standouts from the game. Great footy IQ, great support play, and then also identifying a couple of players out of position. So Sharks fullback Jada Taylor was caught out of position, and they were able to score on the back of that. So every time Brisbane, I guess, looked dangerous and were involved in scoring points, Upton was in and around the ball somehow. But despite, obviously, Brisbane controlling the field position with a lot of ill discipline and errors, Cronulla were able to still kind of stay within a few tries after crossing late in the game. And then, as I said, relatively pleased considering it was early breakaway for the Brisbane Broncos, but able to kind of claw their way back. Unfortunately, just going down in the end. But I think neither side particularly stood out in their last tackle options. There were quite a few kicks that went astray, or they were getting caught with the ball in midfield. So that was kind of a down point. And I think there were many opportunities missed because the kicks either lacked precision or they weren't able to build pressure after some good sets. But I think, Brisbane were able to get away with it because of players like Tamika Upton and some strong defence in the middle. But as I said, Cronulla's poor discipline, probably got in the way of them being able to win. But starting stronger in the second half, they were able to score early, following some strong defense, and able to build some pressure and start to win some field position there. Able to build pressure for the first time in the match, and then there was a couple of controversial calls within the game, and consistently in the NRLW we're seeing newer refs kind of coming through and newer refs kind of coming into the bunker as well. And I feel like it's showing because there are quite a few calls that I think that have kind of been slipped through the cracks or been some quite questionable decisions. One of them being Caitlin Irwin's bomb that she dropped, I believe should have been called a knock on, as I thought it clearly travelled forward, but it was allowed to play on. And so, as I said, they're quite frustrating because that can completely change momentum for the other team. And in such a close game, I think calls like that can really make or break. Really make or break, as I said, the game. Some injuries for Cronulla. We had Rhiannon Byers going off with a shoulder injury. So that'll be something that they'll have to monitor closely. But as I said, looking through some similar points from round one for Cronulla, I don't know that I agree with some of the interchange options, and I think this might have been part of their downfall as well. They're replacing Quincy Dodd, who was easily one of their best players, on the back of players like Caitlin Johnson, Vada George, Ellie Johnson getting some quick play balls and absolutely rolling up the middle. Quincy Dodd's able to come out and kind of shoot around the ruck and play some deceptive footy. And has consistently done so for years, and then bringing her off at the end of the game, putting one of the halves in at hooker, and then bringing Maddie Ashby on late into the game I'm just not sure it works. It seems to be kind of upsetting the rhythm of the Sharks' attack and just getting into the grind and just building pressure. Um, and exposing Emma Hanaway, who's the 6 who gets moved to hooker, just exposes some of her defensive issues, I believe, which I think Brisbane were able to exploit. Um, and so, yeah, they've done it in the trials. They did it in round 1 and they did it in round 2. And I just don't know that it's working. I know Maddie Ashby had quite a lot of success in sevens, but I really think they're just throwing her on in the end and hoping for her to come up with some miracle in the halves just is a bit of a bold move. And I'm just not sure that it's paying off so far. I know it's only round 2 going into round 3, but in such a short competition, I don't know that you have time to kind of waste on trying to figure out your squad. And I thought that they did really well in patches. And then, as I said, once some, questionable interchanges were made, I feel like they just kind of lost their crawl back, which is a little bit frustrating on their behalf. But Brisbane ultimately did what I guess the best teams do, and they were able to, I guess, kind of absorb any momentum that Cronulla were able to create and capitalise on, as I said, that ill-discipline early and relying on their superstars to deliver in the big moments. So you had South Wales, who had just so much time with the ball, able to play a lot of good footy. And as I said, Tamika Upton being in and around the ball at all times, scoring quite a few tries. And for the Sharks, although they've lost the first 2 games, there are some positive signs there, and they've played 2 of, the top teams in the previous years. So I do think a win is coming their way very shortly. But they do have the ability to compete in the NRLW's best when they complete their sets and obviously maintain discipline. So hopefully going into round 3, they're able to just fix those little things up and get a win.
And then talk to me as well for the Broncos. Without obviously watching this game, I think a big one for me, I guess, if there was something to watch out for the NRLW, was going to be Southwell and how she came into that Broncos side, partnered with a very experienced Ali Brigginshaw as well, and similar to DCE Sam Walker in the NRL, like how is the young buck, I guess, going to combine with the veteran, and it was Ali Brigginshaw going to be able to pull herself back. What was that dynamic like in this one? What were your thoughts on Southwell's performance?
I actually really like that comparison with DCE at the Roosters, and I think Jessie seemed to fit in seamlessly. But I did actually have the thought during the game on the weekend that I thought Ali looked a little bit lost. So Ali's kind of playing the 6 role, whereas her entire career she's always played 7 and always kind of been the dominant half. But I think now that she's in her last season, again, she confirmed beginning of the year that this would be her last season. As of last year, I think she withdrew herself from any representative footy, just to focus, as I said, on her last season in the NRLW. She's handed over the captaincy, which she's had since the inaugural season, to Tamika Upton, who's come back to Brizzy, obviously. But yeah, as I said, Jessie Southwell has so much time with the ball. She's played at a very elite level now and has been playing in the NRLW for quite a few years. So despite being only in her early 20s, and Ali, being, I guess, more of a mature head in the game, she was directing the team around really well. But I actually thought Ali looked a little bit lost. I don't know whether that was because it's so early on in the season or they were a little bit flustered with Cronulla coming back. But yeah, I don't know whether her not having full control of the team kind of disrupts the way that she normally plays. And I guess looking previous seasons, she's kind of bounced between that lock position and half as well when representing Queensland. So I guess maybe, just another change for her that she hasn't quite adjusted to yet, or some new combinations on the edge. But yeah, I thought she looked a little bit uncomfortable or unfamiliar as a 6. There were just a few things that she did that I thought were a little bit uncharacteristic. But again, it's still quite early on in the season. I do think she's still probably one of the best to do it in the game, but it'll just take some time for her to find her feet and figure out where she stands in the team now that she's not pulling the ranks.
Yeah, look, it's interesting, right? I think it was similar to sort of DCE at the start of the year for the Roosters, drawing it back to the NRL, and it seemed like DCE was struggling a little bit with that adjustment, and he was trying to be a little bit more flary as well in the 5'8" position too, and go for some more outlandish plays, but it just wasn't really his game. And he's worked out a really solid dynamic now with Sam Walker, and they're playing some really good footy, obviously, at the Chookies at the moment. So hopefully it's a similar sort of thing with Ali and Jessie, and hopefully they can work out that dynamic, and maybe it is Jessie Southwell chancing her arm a little bit more and playing a little bit more off the cuff, and maybe Ali Brigginshaw is can become a player that more so directs play and keeps control. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works, and maybe if they balance between them, like we see more so from an NRL sense at the Warriors with Shania Estevita and Tamari Martin, or even earlier in the year. Chanel and Tamari Martin would be a good example, but even last year with Metcalf too, I really liked how they balanced their game. So maybe that's the dynamic that we see there for the Broncos. It will be interesting to see how the Broncos go this year, but you'd have to say the Broncos and the Chookies probably the favourites for that grand final. Funnily enough, I actually went to the second half of the Roosters Knights game for the NRLW because it was just on before the main NRL games. I'll tell you what, Newcastle did very well to stay in that game. I thought Kira Dibb, I think she's made a real fist of that spot too. It looks like she's really making a good fist of that number 7 jersey, obviously left there by Southwell. And the Knights do look good this year, despite losing a couple of stars. They actually are looking quite solid.
Yeah, no, they're definitely a very competitive team in the NRLW, having won a few premierships. As you said, despite losing a couple of really key players, they've replaced them with just as experienced players in Kira Dibb and the likes. But yeah, from the trial onwards, she's just taken the team into her hands. And yeah, as I said, leading them around the park. She's got quite a strong voice, having been around her at different stages in my career. And then also a pretty good kicking game. She's probably one of the more skilled kickers in the NRLW. And so I think that really is an advantage for the Knights, and I guess having some other really experienced players around her, like Bo in the spine. You've obviously got Higgins there at hooker, and then, think players like Clydesdale on the edge. So just some experience all around the park to kind of help her lay the platform, and then to create some opportunities on the outside or on the back of the forwards laying the platform. So, yeah, she's really kind of found her feet, I think, having gone back to Newcastle. So, yeah, I don't think too much will change throughout the rest of the season for Knights, and I think they'll be very competitive as they always are.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what the end of the season looks like for the NRLW. All right, let's get stuck into your round 19 review. Going to be pretty brief with this one, guys, because the podcast with Soph did go a little bit OT. So we are going to fire through a couple of these games here. We'll start off with the Warriors defeating the West Tigers 32-6. Dominant display from the New Zealand Warriors. The Tigers didn't show up for a little bit of this one. There was some good play in there as well, particularly in the first half. It was a lot closer for the West Tigers, but unfortunately they just got outdone in that second half. It was only 14-6 at half time, so definitely opportunities for the West Tigers to come in the second half and get the job done. They still completed at 84%, but sometimes it is about quality over quantity, and some of the errors late in the game there from the Tigers, and unfortunately just their attack wasn't good enough. The Warriors' defence was outstanding as well, particularly on their goal line, and the Warriors' quality of attack was a lot better. I thought that Tamari Martin, Chanel Estevita, solid games there. The absolute dominance through the middle there at stages for the Warriors too, led by James Fisher-Harris. Obviously, he got some big chunks of minutes there. Tanner Smith has been a bit of a revelation for them, we know, this year as well. He's been absolutely outstanding filling in for them. He could be a future starter of this pack. He's only, it's funny, Tanner Smith, right? You look at him, the bald head and the head tape, and just looking at him visually, you'd think, oh, geez, he might be a veteran, 28 years old, coming into this Warriors side. Even looking at his profile now, it's giving, 27, 28, bit of a late bloomer. He's 22 years of age. He's got so much rugby league left in him. He's only a year younger than me. Which is just an absolute wig out. Again, looking at his profile. No disrespect to Tanner Smith, by the way. Just didn't know your game. 22 years of age. Still got plenty of footy left in him, and he's going to be a future leader of this pack very, very soon. You've obviously got there Aaron Clark doing some really good things. Wade Egan and Sam Healy, just the dynamic of those two, with Wade Egan starting the games and playing some really good footy, and then you get Sam Healy coming off the bench and just running the footy and creating absolute havoc in and around the ruck. It's such a good 1-2 punch for the Warriors in that hooker position. Eddie Arima-Tolva has been massive for the Warriors over the last couple of weeks, particularly in that Dolphins game. He had to jump in the centres there late and didn't look out of place, set up a try. Came in this one. Played 51 minutes in the forwards there. Did an outstanding job. You obviously have Dimitri Valmunga as well, who did really well in this game as well. What else here? Alifiana Khan-Pereira came back in from injury, looked really good. Tane Tuapiki was outstanding as well. So some really good performances soaked in there. Adam Pompey, 2 try assists. He was a bit of a beast there in the centres too. He's been so underrated for them the last couple of seasons. He's been outstanding for the New Zealand Warriors and just been that perfect balance for them, a guy that can really just set up tries very, very well. As I said, for the Tigers, the quality of attack just wasn't good enough in this one. A couple of really poor effort areas just in their defence towards the back end of the game when the Warriors did start to run away with it. I thought it was really poor effort-wise. Terrell May, probably one of his less impactful games, just with how on-song the middles were for the Warriors, and yeah, unfortunately, they just couldn't get the job done, the Tigers. They'll be definitely disappointed with that performance. I think that they'll definitely have a bit of fire under the belly going into next week when they'll be going up against the Dogs. I think that that's a winnable game for the Tigers with how good their side is. And, Luai's got a bit to play for as well. A lot of chat around him. Is he fully invested in this side? He's now leaving as well, and people are misinterpreting that for him wanting out of the club when it's, in fact, the other opposite way. It's the club that have, told him to look elsewhere for next year. But regardless, I think that he's got to just play his best football towards the back end of the season here. Obviously, get himself another deal with another club and then just focus on finishing the year strong for the West Tigers. Saturday, we had the Sharkies absolutely destroy the Dolphins here, 66-0. Incredible performance from the Sharks. And we said on our podcast as well, if the Sharkies do continue to play this sort of footy consistency, and I mean, it's easy to say because this was almost a 10 out of 10 for the Sharks, but if they play even at an 8 or a 7 out of 10 week to week and this sort of footy, they are going to absolutely blow teams off the park. To do this to a Dolphins side, they've still got Trey Fuller, Jermaine Asako, Herbie Farnworth, Avarillo, Young Nafar, who's done extremely well, Cody Nikorima, Jeremy Marshall-King, Fina Fuiaki. They've still got so much talent in this roster for the Dolphins. And to put an absolute clinic on like this against this Dolphins side and leave them to nil and score 66 points on them is just absolutely ridiculous. We obviously saw in this one as well, Nico Hines breaking the points record for the Sharks as well, getting 32. I think it was 32 points there. They completed at 91%, but yeah, Hines was definitely the star of the show in this one. Obviously kicked 11 from 11 goals. He scored 2 tries. He had 3 try assists. He had 10 runs for 83 run meters, 11 post contact, 3 tackle bust, line break, 3 line break assists, 2 offloads, 17 tackles, and he kicked for 140 meters as well. Unbelievable performance from Nico Hines. Tricky Trindle as well. We talk about Hines and his great performance, but the last 2 weeks, I thought that the halves have been the best that they've actually combined as a pairing, which has been really good to see. Hines and Trindle playing good footy together, and that's going to do them an absolute number, especially heading into finals as well, because the big criticism has been, can they combine and, have good performances where they're both playing well? They've shown the last 2 weeks that they can. But not only that, for the Sharkies, they've got Fanua Blake in this side now as well, consistently after the Origin period. They could potentially go on a little bit of a run. Blake Brayley's been key for them as well. He was outstanding in this game. Some of their forwards, Kafusi, one of his better games in this side, obviously been a main starter for them for a couple of seasons and, just recently moved back to the bench, and he's been, this week in particular, he was outstanding. Hazleton's best game by a country mile as well. I thought he was really good, played some decent minutes, 155 run meters. Billy Burns was good. Mulatalo and Katoa as well, coming out of their own end, playing some really good footy. Kennedy's been good. So I think that this Shark side, there's been the top 3 sides we've talked about this year, in regards to premiership threats. Penrith, obviously, with how well they've gone. The Dolphins have been one. And they obviously got pumped by 66 here. And then obviously as well, the Newcastle Knights with how well they're playing. I think the Sharks are in that conversation. I think Manly are as well if they play their best football. But I think the Sharks have sort of now that we've seen the product of what they can do at their absolute best, they can certainly have a good run into finals. We know that now. They've done it for a number of years, but maybe this is sort of what we've been waiting for in regards to, can they take that next step? It's been Hines and Trindle. So if they can play this good footy over the next couple of weeks and both of the halves are playing well, that's going to be the key for them if they are to make a bit of a deeper run into finals than previous seasons. 40-16, the Raiders get the job done over the Bulldogs. I think the Bulldogs season's over as well. I think they're mathematically potentially out of it now, but I think that their season's done, unfortunately. It's just a little bit of effort. Obviously, just tough. I mean, the Raiders were outstanding too. You've got to give credit to the Raiders and their performance. They still haven't been completed at 77% Canberra, 72% there for the Bulldogs. Just in regards to some performances here for Canberra, really thought that, particularly without Strange and Hudson Young for a majority of this game, they only got brought on for about 30 and 40 minutes respectfully. I thought that they played really well. Sanders, particularly just having the confidence back through the middle. I think Papali'i, even though, he came off the bench in this game and didn't play the largest of minutes, I don't think. Papali'i, 28 minutes. Just his presence being there, the spiritual leader, it just brings a lot of confidence through the pack. With Tarpanay and Horsburgh. Both of those guys played outstanding. Hosking was great as well, spending a bit of time at the start of the game in the middle before moving off to the edge. He was great. Noah Martin played really well on that right edge as well. Hudson Young was good when he came onto the field too. Papali'i was good in his return game. And they just got a lot of ascendancy through the middle, and it really rattled the Dogs. Unfortunately. And the Dogs, they couldn't really return serve too well. There were a couple of moments there where the Dogs played all right, but for the most part, they were getting rolled a little bit through the middle, and then they brought their smaller guys on off the bench, and it didn't really help too much, unfortunately. They had to bring Sean O'Sullivan on as well for a little stage there, so the only forward they really had off the bench was Jack Underhill in this game, and, Kurtman obviously started, so Bailey Hayward, he also came off the bench as well. Tough one for the Doggies, unfortunately. Absolutely dominated. I think that is their season over. Galvin had a good start to the game, put a couple of kicks in for some forced dropouts and repeat sets. And I thought that the Dogs would go on a bit of a run after that as well, but unfortunately it just wasn't meant to be. They also lost Critter. He's on a day-to-day basis. Just they're watching him and determining on how long he's going to be out for, but it could be a little bit of an extended period there potentially. To be honest, by the time this podcast comes out, he could be named again just with, obviously the fact that they need him in this side to be successful. Critter, they've played him through an AC joint injury that he's sort of struggled with for a little while there, particularly before Origin, and now this injury as well. I hope they just give him the time to rest and recover. I think their season's done now, so they have the opportunity to just rest him, bring a couple of the younger guys through. I think that's probably the play there for the Dogs, but again, I wouldn't be shocked just with how their season's turned out for them to name Stephen Crichton in the side again this week. Roosters obviously getting the job done for Daniel Tupou in his 300th game, and 3 tries there for him as well. Really good to see for Tupes. Obviously getting over the line a couple times there. Thought that they played really good for him as well, and the first half was a lot more even, and, it took Hugo a little while to sort of adjust. He's been in the centres the last couple of weeks, moving back into that halfback jersey, and just playing as the leader in that side, the number 7, and you could tell that DCE might have been told to sort of take a little bit of a backwards seat and just let, Hugo Savala dictate play a little bit there. Had a nice little try assist. He ran quite a bit and challenged the line with a bigger frame, which was good to see. Although he played quite well, Hugo Savala, especially in the second half when the Roosters really put the foot down. Nafa'u White was solid there through the middle as well, 183 metres from 19 runs. He played 58 minutes there. Spencer Lenya was great, 47 minutes, and then 153 run metres from him as well. Siwa Wong and Victor Radley were just unbelievable. Siwa Wong and Victor Radley both playing the 80 minutes in this game. Siwa Wong obviously on the edge there. Radley 80 minutes through the middle after, obviously didn't play in Origin, was in the reserves, but It's a solid effort for him. 157 run meters, 2 tackle busts. I thought he was very key. Just his intensity coming out of the line as well. And I think that, especially in the second half, it really did rattle Parramatta a little bit through the middle. Uelu, I thought, was good when he came on as well. Got a fair little chunk of minutes there. We did see Lasalu obviously get onto the field as well. Thought he was outstanding when he got on. And even Egan Butcher was really solid through the middle as well. So, really solid performance by the Sydney Roosters. Thought that Marky Mark was good. That the flick pass for Rob Toya try was insane. He was very, very good. Billy Smith had a solid game as well. But yeah, Toops, obviously a big game for him, and he gets 3 tries, which was really good to see. Good little build out as well for that game. A couple of supporters there. The bottom rows there at Allianz Stadium were completely full. We obviously went out to this game. We were up in members with my uncle, who had a couple of passes. So we were up there in members. It was a good experience. And then after the game, obviously the presentation as well, and just how humble Daniel Tupou is as a bloke. You could tell he sort of didn't like it as well. After the game, they were obviously giving him a lot of praise and his flowers for a wonderful career. But you could tell he was sort of a little bit standoffish about the whole thing as well. For Parramatta, look, not too much to talk about here. They were very good and very resilient defensively in that first half. I thought that they started the game really well. I thought that Tuivasa had a really good first stint. Jack Williams was a beast in this game as well. Played the full 80 minutes there in the middle. I thought that Dylan Walker had a really good impact when he came onto the field as well. Things did start to open up a little bit for Parramatta. Obviously, just after halftime, we saw Papali'i go over. They did lose Volkman, so that was a pretty big loss for them. They obviously had to bring Josh Papali'i onto the field, and they weren't able to use one of their other big boppers. Tinkin Brown had to play 47 minutes off the bench, and he did go quite well too. But unfortunately, just wasn't meant to be for Parramatta. They did get a little bit rattled in that second half, and the Roosters did run away with it. We are going to fly through this one because the podcast is going a little bit OT. We'll kick off with the Rabbitohs. Again, we were out for this game. Really good atmosphere there for Jai. Obviously, it packed out for the most part stadium. For about 30,000 there, which isn't too bad for Allianz. For a core stadium. But good little crowd there for Jai Arrow's day, and obviously the Wiggles performed at halftime. We got to go on the field at full time, and they did the jersey presentation for Jai. Obviously, give him a frame with Broncos, Titans, Rabbitohs, and Queensland jersey in there for him as well, which was really cool to see. For the Bunnies, I tell you what, it was definitely one where it was just hold on, because the Knights did come after that game late. Callum Ponga obviously scored 2 tries, unbelievable moments, and then had a really good little shift and just a couple of offloads through the middle really troubled the Bunnies, particularly with a smaller pack. You wouldn't expect them to be that fatigued through the middle of the field, but they sort of were late in the game, and they threw a couple of offloads there, the Knights, and broke through. Harrison Graham obviously gets his try. All of a sudden, it's 24-26, and we're defending only a 2-point lead, and thank God we got to hold on to that one and get the win for Jai. It was a really, really good win for the Bunnies. Keon obviously got through the full 80 minutes in this one again. He's been an absolute warrior this year. But Brandon Smith's been the standout for me. He's been outstanding for the Rabbitohs since coming in, and he's just his leg speed and what he's able to do in and around the ruck from 9 or from 13 as well. A couple of the tackles late as well. To force errors from some of those Newcastle forwards. It was definitely some key moments in there, which probably won the Rabbitohs the game. Dave Fafita was very strong as well. I thought Cam Murray was outstanding. Obviously, backing up from Origin, played the full 80 minutes in this one. Didn't take too many runs, but defended his absolute arse off. Only missed the one tackle there. As I said, Dave Fafita was pretty good. We lost Ewan Aiken with an injury there, so we did see a couple of different changes in the back row as well. Liam LeBlanc got onto the field. Jamie Humphries was there. I thought Jai Gray as well coming onto the field and having to play on the wing with Dane Jennings coming off with that cut to his knee. That was hectic. It was like all the way, I'm not sure if you can see on the camera, but like pretty much all down here, 35 odd stitches for him. Dane Jennings, sorry. But he was looking like he was going to have a solid game there. But when Jai Gray got onto the wing, he just did an exceptional job, which just speaks to him. Tallis Duncan for me is pretty much, I'd argue, if he continues to play like this next year and, pending injuries and whatnot, I think that he's going to be an Origin player next year. I think he'll be in that 17 or 19 for New South Wales. He's just been unbelievable and so underrated for the Bunnies, and I just feel like he'd be the perfect jersey 19 for New South Wales in the sense that you could just bring him on. If there's an injury in the centres, you bring him on. If you need a change in the back row, you can bring him on. You can play him through the middle. So just that versatility there, I think he'd be perfect for a jersey 19. For New South Wales, Ponga had a big game coming back for Newcastle from State of Origin footy. I thought that he was massive, very dangerous, especially again late in the game when they started to offload the footy. Dill Brown, Fletcher Sharp and KP, that's when they became their most dangerous. And as I said, we did very well to hold on to that lead, South Sydney. This one we didn't watch too closely. We were on the way home from the Rabbitohs and the Newcastle game, so we'll just quickly touch on it. Cowboys obviously getting the job done in Golden Point. Jake Clifford, I thought that he had some nice moments, but the kicking game definitely hurt a little bit. Both halfbacks struggling a little bit with the goal kicking there, unfortunately. Only the 1 from 4 from either goal kicker there, so it was a bit of a tough one in that regard. You'd argue if one team kicks one more goal, they win the game, obviously. But I thought that both sides were very solid. It was pretty end-to-end footy from mostly of what I saw. Leify had a pretty good first stint. We got to watch the little spit at the start of that game. They obviously put him starting with Hetherington off the bench, which I think has worked for them the last couple of weeks. Paseka's been good. I'm just trying to find the stats here for this one. Tom Travojevic, 200 metres plus, so he was killing it. Tolu Kula, we did see some nice moments from him in this game as well. Lee Hyde is getting through a ton of work again. Hamole was huge in this game as well, big part as to why they kept this game so close. The Manly Seagulls. And then for the Cowboys, I thought Drinky was very good. 163 odd metres there. Tommy Chester had a nice little back on the inside try there early in the game. He obviously had Purdue playing some good footy. Still feel like that left side might be a little bit of a liability defensively. And, Purdue, we've given him a lot of credit on the podcast. Obviously, he's been great defending on that left-hand side the last couple of weeks. Had a massive defensive display the last 2 weeks against the Warriors and then someone else the week after. But he's... It's not just him, though. I feel like it's the rest of that edge as well. Laybutt's pretty new to that left side. But Purdue was pretty good. 2 try assists in this one. Ran for 84 metres. Thought he had a really good game at Purdue. 129 metres there for McCarley. 134 for Taumalolo. So those guys starting the game well. That's pretty much it for this one. The Cowboys were probably the better side from the little bits and pieces that I watched. It was very end-to-end, as I said. But the Cowboys were probably the better side, and I think Hamole coming in was a massive difference for the Manly Seagulls. Turbo obviously having a decent performance there at the back as well. And then the last game here, we had the Melbourne Storm and the Gold Coast Titans. 22-18, the final scoreline in this one for Melbourne. It was an okay performance. I think the Titans really did come to play, and even with such a low completion rate, just because their attack is so dangerous, the Titans at stages, they just were able to stay in that contest really well. I thought that the Titans was a massive performance. Phil Sami was great. I thought that Keanu Kinney was really dangerous at the back there at fullback. He was a massive difference for them. Zane Harrison and Jaden Campbell were playing really well. Jaden Campbell himself had some massive moments. That try was unbelievable. Oliver Pascoe as well, very crafty out of the 9. I thought he did a really good job. Tino was big as well for them through the middle, coming back from Origin duties. You had Bo Firma with a bit of a strong performance there as well. Klesi Haas came on, just defended his ass off in this game. That was sort of what it was like for the period that he was on the field. They did lose Cooper Bye there. As soon as he came on, he had to come straight back off with a shoulder injury, so wishing him all the very best. But yeah, it was a good performance from the Titans, all things considered, going up against the Melbourne side, chasing wins. And obviously just weren't able to get the job done. Munster was rested in this game. We've now found out that he's going to be out for a couple of weeks with a knee injury as well there. Otherwise, you'd think he would have backed up for this Melbourne side. But Jerome Hughes thought he had a solid game there as well. Just the completion rate, giving the Titans some good ball, even though the Titans' completion rate, 69%, it wasn't great themselves. The Titans did well with the footy that they had, I thought, for the most part. It was a pretty scrappy game. but some decent performances littered throughout. Stefano, Cooper Clark I thought was good as well. Wishart was outstanding at 5'8" too. Got through plenty of work, so not too bad there from the Melbourne Storm, but definitely need to be better if they are still a chance to go 6 from 7, which I think, if the draw post round 20, we've gone a bit through it on our podcast as well. It isn't that great. Let's flip the script back to the NRL, or more specifically to State of Origin. Obviously, we're probably just less than a week removed now from the decider. New South Wales getting the job done. So we won't go too deep into the game, but I do want to get your thoughts on what you made of New South Wales. Obviously, what's changed between Game 2 and Game 3 to obviously let them, get that win on the board. And yeah, just your overall thoughts on the game.
What a great game. Not just because we won, but just in general. There were moments there where I was on the edge of my seat thinking that Queensland were potentially going to crawl their way back. We know that they play until the dying second, so they had me on the edge of my seat for sure. But yeah, very proud of, I guess, all of the New South Welshmans, whether they were the experience in James Tedesco or people making their debuts in Bostock. I think they all had, a pretty good game. Nathan Cleary, the Iceman. Finally, people, I think, can stop chirping him for not winning a New South Wales series, and now they can say he's basically won every single award I think ever in rugby league, or every milestone in rugby league I think he's achieved, except I believe Dally M, halfback of the year. I think for this season he's as long as he doesn't get suspended again, I think he'll be in a pretty good chance to get halfback of the year or Dally M medalist of the year. I think the beginning of the season we saw he was definitely one of the best halfbacks in the game, and will continue to do so in the remainder of the season, with Penrith being another finals contender. I think the difference in this game versus the first two was our middles just, I think, won the ruck consistently. And with Moses' kicking game, I saw obviously Jake's post that went a little bit viral. I think it had something like 60,000 views or something like that. But yeah, I think Moses' kicking game very early on was able to allow them to just bully Queensland in their own half and just keep them down there, which then obviously allowed us to slowly just break away Queensland with our relentless defence, and then create some opportunities in attack with some really hard carries. And then I think there was a penalty really early on one of our outside backs taking a carry and tried to get a quick play of the ball. And then, as I said, kick for touch, and we were able to just build pressure, and that kind of saw some lapses in the Queensland defence, which doesn't happen very often. But yeah, I definitely think that having Liam Martin back in the squad, he's just built for Origin, and he's got a few screws loose that I think is perfect for the New South Wales jersey. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, first of all, talking about the line speed and just the Blues forwards winning the ruck consistently, I completely agree. I think that was a huge difference. And even when we weren't winning the ruck, particularly early in that game, talked about Moses' kicking game, it almost frustrated Queensland a little bit because you obviously, winning the defensive sets there, keeping New South Wales in between that 20 and 30 metre line, and then Moses just kicks at 60 metres, and all that hard work in defence doesn't mean anything because now you've still got to get the ball out of your own end. So I think that did frustrate Queensland. I think that was the key thing for me, just watching the game. Obviously called it with Rabbitohs radio podcast, did a little collaboration with Momentum there, and called the game. And the key thing that myself and Chaps noticed was just that frustration catching over with Queensland. It seemed like it got to a boiling point for them, and even it affected their attack as well because some of the options that they were taking earlier in the game weren't great, and they were giving away a couple of penalties in defence as well with a little bit of frustration. I thought that, you talk about Liam Martin, he was outstanding, and the key thing as well, just going both sides of the ruck and really just trying to go after that Queensland team every time that they were taking the ball back. Both wingers on both sides. He was just leading that kick chase, and it really inspired the other boys through the middle as well to sort of command those second and third tackles as well, just coming out of the line and trying to really bash the Queenslanders, which was good to see. I thought Murray was massive too. There's a lot of talk about, should he start, should he come off the bench? I'm still of the opinion that he should start, right? But seeing him in that role, coming off the bench and the impact that he was able to have for New South Wales still coming off the bench in that way. And Yowie definitely, compared to the first two games, definitely moving more into a front row role. That dynamic, it doesn't matter if Murray starts or he's off the bench. You're going to get a really good impact from him. He's going to change the game. If he plays more than 50 minutes, regardless of how he sort of comes on into the game, whether it is off the bench or starting, I think that's perfect. If he does end up sitting on the bench the next couple of series, while it's obviously going to be debated across all different podcasts and stuff, and we'll definitely talk about it over the next couple of seasons, I still feel like it doesn't matter as long as he's playing big enough minutes where he can have an impact with his running game and obviously being that link man. For Queensland, I do want to talk on one bloke that we sort of brought up on Momentum, myself and Jakey, when we were previewing, I think it was Game 2. That's Briton Ikra. I thought he was probably their best player. A couple of runs that he had, obviously the run on Tedesco where Tedesco had to go off the field wasn't great as a New South Wales fan watching that one, but he was just commanding with his presence as well. Some really tough carries on the edge there. They were definitely going to him as a bit more of a strike player when they weren't getting that ascendancy through the middle too. It seemed like they were, once they saw how invested he was in that game and how much he tried to swing the game back in Queensland's favour with a couple of his carries, they did tend to go that way a little bit more, and he did have a really solid impact on the game. Talk to me about Briton Ikra, because obviously he's only just been made eligible with the new eligibility rules around Kiwi players. If you are born in Australia, or if you are you come over a certain age, you can play for New South Wales or Queensland depending on who you play your junior footy for. Talk to me about Briton Ikra. I think he was probably in the top 3 at least Queensland players in this game. I think he was probably their best.
As you said, he was able to appear in all 3 of the test games. The Origin games this season, which was, as you said, probably a saving grace for Queensland. Looking at, I guess, some of his stats from the game, he made 102 tackles in the 2026 series, so across all 3 games, at 90% tackle efficiency. In such a fast, physical game like State of Origin, that's obviously quite good, and you want your middles to be tackling machines, particularly on the edge there. It can be difficult defending against the likes of, your Hudson Youngs, your Liam Martins, your Nathan Clearys, that kind of quite dominant in Clubland and again in Origin. So he did really well there. And as you said, with some tough carries, he totaled 191 running meters and had some a lot of fantasy points from a couple of really good performances. But as you said, tough carries, great defender. I don't think you can really ask for too much more from a second rower in your Origin series. And, as you said, with the new rules, there'll be plenty of players like himself that are able to get that opportunity to play for their state, despite previously not being able to. So hopefully that, I guess, is a motivation for a lot of other players in similar positions that weren't previously eligible, but are now able to put on the Queensland or New South Wales jersey and represent their state. One thing I did want to get your opinion on while we're talking about Queensland, though, is the interchanges at the end of the game. I thought with the current spine that they had, and then bringing Reece Walsh on following the HIA, and then taking KP off. What were your thoughts on that? Because I thought Kalen Ponga was one of their best attacking players and probably one of the biggest threats to the New South Wales team all game. And I know obviously Reece Walsh is a freak in himself and can pull anything out of anything. But I thought it was a strange move to bring KP off when I thought, as I said, he was one of their best players throughout the entire game and were, as I said, poking his head through the line in attack in a couple of different instances earlier in the game.
Well, KP actually didn't come off. He actually moved into the back row. So they had Reece Walsh playing a bit more of a fullback / 5'8" type of role while Sammy Walker was off. And then they moved Kalen Ponga into the back row, moved Walsh to fullback, and then when they put Sam Walker back on. So they had all 4 of them on at once. It was definitely interesting. I think that when Walsh came on, you could tell that they were attacking a lot better. I thought that Walsh definitely came into the game and made an impact, and especially when we had Murray defending out in the centres at a stage there and Batman Best was on the wing, they scored pretty much straight away. Walsh was a big part of that as well, and just the attack that he was generating down that right-hand side. Again, talking about the better players for Queensland, I thought that he was definitely one of them when he came on, and I almost feel like as well with Walshy, it'll be interesting to sort of look back when we talk about the changes we're going to make for next year. But I almost feel like he's played himself into that bench role now. Like if Kalen Ponga keeps playing well, at fullback, at Clubland, and doesn't do anything wrong to take himself out of that Queensland jersey, I almost feel like even though Reece Walsh fully fit, we know how good he can be at fullback in Origin, but he's played so good coming off the bench and playing in the halves or in that roaming sort of role that I'd be pretty reluctant to take him out. I did think with Ponga, it was interesting. They threw some pretty interesting shape down that right-hand side with Ponga in that back row sort of role, and it sort of did confuse things a little bit at stages. I also think they tore us to shreds a couple of sets going down that right-hand side too, just with Walsh and his X-factor, and they had a lot of attacking players on, and it did get quite overwhelming at a little stage there. But I feel like once we got Ethan Strange back into right centre, we moved a couple pieces around. Critter went to the left wing, and Murray back into the middle. I thought that things did start to calm down, and our defence on the edges were a lot better and a lot cleaner, which again is something we'll talk about when we talk about our changes for next year. But certainly dangerous when all those changes happened for Queensland, and we definitely did well to hold on there for sure, but definitely New South Wales the better side. Let's talk about our changes for next year. I think that we'll start off with Queensland. One that I'll sort of get your opinion on first is our man Munster. I think he's under a little bit, not so much pressure. I feel like and I said this on my podcast as well, I feel like with Munster, if Queensland won, that would be his swan song. I think he would have ridden off into the sunset. He would have retired from rep football, at least from a Queensland sense, and they would have gone to the next guy. Yeah, that's just my opinion. It's definitely the best way to go out. He's had such a successful Origin career. Getting a dominant win in a series like that, I think, would have just been perfect for him to sort of sail off into the sunset. I feel like now Queensland lost, and particularly lost in the fashion that they did against a side that they've been better than for pretty much both of the games, even though New South Wales got lucky with the Ponga send-off and all that sort of drama in game one. I feel like I'm just unsure what the plan is going to be for Munster, whether he is going to continue playing State of Origin. And I think the other thing is, it's not even just Munster and what he wants to do. I also feel like, Billy's made some pretty big calls. Obviously, DCE dropped a couple of years ago for Tommy Dearden. Tommy Dearden is set to come back into this side. Sam Walker was unreal in the first two games when Queensland had the ascendancy through the middle of the field. I don't know what the plan is going to be. I'm sort of leaning towards Dearden Sam at this stage, not without seeing a ball kicked next year. But we know how good Munster can be in Origin as well, so it's just so hard. I could almost not make... I did a podcast doing all the changes for New South Wales and for Queensland last week, and I was sort of struggling to, I guess, make a decision on those two because they're both so good, and, Dearden's had some big Origin moments. What are your thoughts? Would you be going with Munster and Walker? Would you be going with Dearden and Munster? Would you be going with Sam and Dearden? What's your thought process behind all that?
Such a tough one, as you said. We don't know, obviously, how performance is going to look early into next year and the results of the NRL. But yeah, as you said, Munster's such a freak when it comes to the footy, but looking, I guess, at his age and the performance of Storm at the moment and his club performance, is Billy, I guess, brave enough to drop someone who's been so pivotal in the last few seasons for Queensland? I definitely think so. I think, as you said, he's been quite bold in some of his calls for Queensland over the last couple of seasons, and I don't think that he'd be scared to drop Munster for Dearden. As you said, he's had quite a successful stint in the Queensland jersey. Sam Walker, obviously very dominant this series, and is quite young, so he's got, I imagine, that 7 jersey for quite a long time, unless injuries keep him out of the game or the series. But yeah, that's definitely a tough one. They all bring something different. Obviously, Munster's a bit more unpredictable, whereas Sam obviously is still quite young and he's still has a little bit of unpredictability to him, but a little bit more composure around the ball. And I thought as well that Munster went a little bit missing in that last game, and not through any fault of his own. I just don't think that they had much off the cuff opportunity to play much footy because they were being drowned in their own end for most of the game. And we saw, the likes of Reece Walsh, KP, and some other, Harry Grant is quite creative out of hooker and stuff as well. So, even if you have KP and Walsh in there at some point and one of them jumps into 6, if Munster gets dropped, I wouldn't say that that's a bad option either. Again, then you've got Dearden in there as well, and then do you keep Walsh on the bench, or do you switch Dearden into 14? And, if he has to come on and play hooker for some reason, or he can come on in the 6 or 7 jersey if needed now with the 6-man bench. So there's quite a lot of options there. And, I think it'll largely be dependent on, what Munster decides to do if he wants to retire from representative footy. But I guess knowing him, I don't think he'll want to finish, as you said, on that loss. So I think he'll still be eligible. But as I said, whether it's Billy Slater kind of gives him another opportunity to earn the jersey back, not that I think he deserves to lose it per se. But, looking at Tommy Dearden's performance over the last couple of seasons, I do think that he is definitely going to have some competition for that 6 jersey next season.
Gun to head, what's your 6 and 7 for Queensland?
Based on, I guess, Storm's current performance, I'm going to say Dearden Walker.
All right. Yeah, look, I've gone the same way for my side for next year. I think Dearden's had so many great games for Queensland. He's going to be the future of the side. I think Billy is known for making big calls in Origin and unexpected calls at that as well. I just feel like, as I said, for me, if Queensland were to have won that series like we all thought they were going to, I think Munster would have just made that decision for Billy. But I feel like now it's a decision that, depending on if Billy is going to be the coach next year as well and what he decides to do, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there, what unfolds. I guess the next one is Ponga versus Walsh. I'm sort of leaning towards Ponga staying in the fullback jersey if he's playing good footy. And as I said, I feel like Walsh has played himself into that bench role. What are your thoughts?
No, I definitely think Ponga has earned himself the fullback jersey. I don't think Reece Walsh played poorly, but I definitely don't think that he was as good as KP has been throughout the entire season. There was a little bit of rocks or diamonds there with the Brisbane squad as a whole. Even, despite injuries, you're looking at players, like your Ben Hunts and stuff that have consistently played Origin for the last decade, basically, and obviously not being included in the squad. He was able to crawl his way back in towards the end of the series. But yeah, I do think, as you said, he kind of can cover several positions. So having him on the bench there, or the extended bench, is wise. And even bringing him on at the end of the game with a tired middle pack or a tired edge, he's just going to carve up. So I think having that little bit of, or element of surprise and unpredictability with his speed and creativity, he can tear us apart around the ruck, or even, in attack on the edge as well. So I agree. I think KP's definitely earned himself the fullback jersey for next year, pending injury and, early performances next year. But what he did this series, I definitely don't think that, I guess there's much competition with Reece for that fullback position. Again, you could even throw him into the 6 if needed, and to bring Reece on. But again, that's kind of looking much beyond what I guess we have available to us now. So I definitely think that, he'll probably stay on the interchange bench as an option to come on as that utility outside back player.
And then another one that I guess not too many people are going to be thinking about, but it always seems to be something with Billy, like the ever reliable Kurt Capewell, right? I feel like every season, the last, I'd say 2 or 3 seasons, when Queensland selections always come about, we talk about, what our teams look like and whatnot. We always seem to leave Kurt Capewell out. He always seems to be selected, and he's Mr. Reliable. He always comes in and does a terrific job. He's kick chase. He just goes to another level in State of Origin footy. I look at Jeremiah Nanai. If he's fit and available, I feel like next year, obviously depending on form as well, he's the future. Kurt Capewell's only getting older, and again, we say this every single year with Kurt Capewell, and I know that there's every chance that I'm going to be wrong. I just think that Nanai is going to be a terrific Origin player, and he offers more strike and attack. I know that Kurt Capewell does the non-negotiables and the small things in the effort areas. But when we're talking about out-and-out strike players, I think that Nanai is that dude. So I guess gun to head for yourself. let's just say that Nikora keeps his spot in the right edge, who are we picking on the left for Queensland next year? Pending form, obviously. Nanai or Kurt Capewell?
As you said, I guess kind of looking at the squad as a whole, if you get rid of the likes of Munster and some of the other more experienced players, and older players, he was captain this year for the team. And if you're getting rid of some of those older players, maybe it's, Billy's transitional years for Queensland, kind of bringing some of those younger players through, like your Sam Walkers and all of that kind of thing. Maybe he does lean um, more towards sorry, just had a mind like Nanai, leads more towards him. As you said, a very exciting player, has plenty of attacking flair and scores plenty of tries in clubland, but also has the opportunity for some really strong defense. So again, looking at, I guess, the body of Kurt Capewell being, I guess, a little bit older, having played quite a few years now. Do you know who he's signed for? Is he still with
Yeah,
New
he's still with
Zealand?
the Warriors, yep.
Yeah, next season. Obviously, they're playing quite well at the moment. I imagine they're probably going to have another positive season next year with some young guns in their squad. So I don't see him playing poorly per se. It'll just be whether his body's up for it. And then I guess the direction that Billy wants to take the squad, if he wants to kind of lean more towards that younger, new crop of players like your Nanais and your Walkers, I think that that's probably where the team is heading. As you said, if Cameron Munster doesn't get the jersey next year, you've got a lot of young players coming through now. Your Rabbitohs, your Selwyn Cobbos, your Hamaso, your Jojo Fafitas, Sam Walkers. They're all very young players and very exciting players. And I just think that Jeremiah Nanai fits into that mold a little bit more so than your Kurt Capewell. Again, great player, as you said, does his 1%ers, is very reliable, very consistent in the jersey. I feel like he's kind of like the forward version of Dane Gagai. Doesn't always, stand out too much at clubland, but when he puts that Queensland jersey on, there's just something about it that he's able to pull magic out and just do his job for the state.
Yeah, 100%. It'll be interesting to see what they go for as well. Like, you think about that back row depth with everyone available. You'll have Nanai, Capewell, Dave Fafita, Helam Lukey, Kula Kefu Finafuiaki, Britton Nikora, at a pinch, Tom Gilbert. That's like 7 players there. So you'll have a ton of depth. There's probably a couple of people I'm forgetting potentially. But they're stacked at full strength. So it will be interesting to see. I guess, obviously, form warranted. We haven't seen a ball kicked in 2027. What Queensland decide to go with there. I don't think there's really too much else to debate with Queensland. They were the more dominant side in this series. So you don't really need to change too much from that formula. Talking about New South Wales, I think there is a real debate around Tedesco. At least there has been around the media space. A lot of people have been talking about Tedesco. A lot of people didn't have him in their Game 3 sides. Talk to me. Is Tedesco in your side next year? Or are you leaning towards a Dylan Edwards? Are you leaning towards Tom Trbojevic or something a little bit different?
Honestly, I don't know. It's so hard. I don't know that I'd lean towards Tom Trbojevic. Great player. But again, injuries has just kept him out of the game for so long. That I'd probably lean more towards your Teddy in that instance. But again, he's also someone that's kind of at the end of his career and he's still performing quite well. But another concussion that he suffered in the third game of the series, and I believe that's over 10 now in his career. So whether that's something that's taken into consideration as well. But I think, despite some of the poor performances in probably more so the second game for Teddy, I do think he definitely stood up in some moments throughout the Origin series. So it's a hard one to choose. It'll probably have to be, again, the form going into next year. But as you said, Dylan Edwards is a freak in himself. But they're different, I guess, styles of fullback. They're both very busy, both love taking lots of carries, and both very fit and very competitive. But I guess it just depends on, I guess, who the coach ends up being next year, if Laurie Daly gets another crack or if they're going to look to go elsewhere, and whether they want to go for that more mature squad with experience or if they want to kind of, as I said, kind of lean more towards that younger up-and-coming squad for the next, decade or so, if they're looking to kind of just drip feed that slowly. So if you had to pick, who would you go with for fullback, do you think?
For me, it's probably Edwards, slightly. I just think that you've got a lot of game breakers to pick from fully fit. I think that was the argument to keep Tedesco in, was the fact that he can break the game open for you, and he's the only one that scores that try for New South Wales in game one, and I completely agree from a fullback sense. But you'll have a lot of game breakers available next year. Hopefully Latrell Mitchell's back. You'll have potentially Tom Trbojevic in the centres. I think both of those guys, if they're fully fit, are in the side. Bradman Best, I'd have Bradman Best, locking down a jersey, to be fair, in the centres too. So I think it will be maybe competition between Latrell, Tom Trbojevic, Staggs, these sort of guys for the other centre spot. At Critter as well, potentially. I think a big question mark too, I guess, is, Brian Toto obviously got dropped for the decider. Did go all in now for the taller wingers, or do you go for a Brian Toto again next year just off what he's done in the Origin arena? But back on the fullback thing, I think it will be either one of Edwards or Tedesco. I think those two are the front runners, depending on what Tedesco wants to do and I guess how you're building your side next year. You'd expect it to be a different coach with a different game plan. So it'll be interesting to see what the side looks like there. Just on Brian Toto versus no Brian Toto, what's your thought process there? Would you go with the taller wingers and just back them in like your Bostocks and Akiras and a couple of other guys as well? Or do you think that just with what Brian Toto's done, maybe he had a poor game 1 and 2, but he deserves to be, at the forefront of the selectors' mind frames going into game 1 next year?
I definitely think he still needs to be in contention for it. I don't think he's lost that jersey forever. As you said, a poor performance in game 1 and 2. I do think they were very uncharacteristic performances for him. We know he's one of the more safe outside backs in terms of, errors and things like that. Again, looking at the height, it's a hard one. I know looking at some of Queensland players, they're quite aerial. And they use that to their advantage, definitely, in the first 2 games. And we were obviously able to adjust for that in the last one with some taller outside backs. But I don't know, he's just so strong for us coming out of our own yardage. Obviously, looking at his run meters every single game, regardless of whether it's for Panthers, Australia, or New South Wales, he's an absolute meter eater and strong defensive player as well, physically. But obviously, defending those high balls can be a bit of a challenge for him. But I definitely don't think he's lost the jersey forever. I think he'll be given another opportunity, just whether, obviously, it's in the squad or in the starting 17 will be a different story. As you said, it largely depends on the style of footy that the coach next year wants to play, and obviously that's not confirmed at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see who it ends up being and how they end up going. But if you look at, obviously, his performances in the several seasons prior, he's definitely been one of our key players, and I don't think that it would be fair to completely neglect him or to completely dismiss him after 1 or 2 poor performances.
100%. I guess the next one is Moses or Strange. For me, I'm almost leaning towards Moses just off the back of the kicking game in game 3 and what it provided, and I feel like we've now seen an example of how this halves pairing between Moses and Cleary can work, because that's been the whole argument for games 1 and 2. You could argue even last year, the halves pairing didn't fully gel. It was the first game where I thought, this is the perfect dynamic for these two if they want to play Origin footy together. What are your thoughts? Are you leaning into it, or do you think Cleary should have a more natural ball running 6 next to him?
Prior to game 3, I would have said Strangey, but after watching the third game, I do think that combination can work. But on the back of that, the middles need to win the ruck for them to allow to play like that. I think that's why we saw it so clunky, outside of the fact that he'd come back from an injury and he was probably a little bit underdone going into those games, into the second game. But yeah, looking at the third game, if our middles are able to win and get some go forward within the team, I do think that it allows him to kind of take a little bit more of a backseat and let Cleary take control in good ball. But as you said, coming out of our own end, Mitchell took 90% of the kicks because he's got such a big, long kick on him. And it allows, obviously, Nathan Cleary to get a little bit of pressure off himself as well to play and save himself for those good ball opportunities. So right now, I would say yes. But if you're looking at any halves pairing, you can't play good footy if your middles aren't winning the ruck and if you're not getting any go forward. So I think that the critique that was made on the first 2 games was a little bit unfair because of that, because we weren't dominating the middle, whereas in the third game we were able to obviously get plenty of go forward, and they were able to kind of play some creative footy on the back of that and play off the cuff, play eyes up, and allow them both to shine at different moments throughout the game. But yeah, right now, if I had to say yes to a 6 and 7 pairing, it would be Mitchell Moses and Cleary. But I'd definitely be having Strangey somewhere within the squad. I think he's the future of New South Wales, and he'll be wearing a jersey for a long time. It's just about managing, I guess, experience versus youth, as we've said across both teams, and it'll largely depend on the coach for next season.
Do you think that Ethan Strange will probably take the mantle off Burton as just the guy that gets picked in jersey 18 or 19 most years, and is that just out and out utility?
I think that's a very good comparison. I'd say so. I think he's definitely earned himself another Blues jersey off the back of his performances this year, regardless of where he played. And there was potential and talk about him coming on in the middle and, second row and anything and everything in between. So I definitely think he can be that person. And he's not only a very creative, exciting attacking player, he's also a strong defender. We saw him in the first game. I think it was it wasn't Munster. Who was it? It was one of the second rowers. It was a Capewell, I think. He absolutely folded someone in half.
No, it was Munster. It was Munster.
It was Munster. He absolutely folded someone in half. Yeah, Munster in the first game. And so I definitely think that his defense and I guess his aggression in the game is built for Origin. And he, as such a young player already, has shown that he can hold his own in that arena.
All right, I'm going to throw you some names for both New South Wales and Queensland. I want you to say yes or no as if they're a chance of debuting in State of Origin next year. Not if they are going to be dead set in the side or should dead set be in the side, but if they're a chance of debuting. Start off with New South Wales. Toby Couchman.
Oh, I don't know if next year, but definitely in the next 3 years.
Kurt Donahue.
No.
Tallis Duncan.
No, but I do see in the future him being involved in the squad.
Terrell May.
Ooh. I don't know because of his attitude, but in terms of his performance, I think yes.
Jacob Kiraz.
I think he's a great winger. I just don't know if he's ahead of the current outside backs that are in the squad, so I'm going to say no.
All right, and then for Queensland, Tom Chester.
Again, I don't see him beating the current players in those positions for Queensland, so I'm going to say no.
Ezra Mam.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, I think he could be another one of those Reece Walshes that you have him on the bench and he can kind of come on anywhere. But I don't know that his current form in Brisbane is going to be so dramatically changed going into next season that it'll put him in the squad. So yeah, I'm going to stick with no.
Jackson Purdue.
You've given me some really hard ones.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to say no. I think despite the loss of the series, I think Slater will stick with a pretty similar squad going into next year. I think there will only be 1 or 2 changes pending injury.
The last one I've got here is Heilum Lukey from the Cowboys.
I think I've said no to all of the Queenslanders. So we'll go yes for Hill and Lukey just to change things up.
Alrighty. All right. There you go, guys. That is it. You heard it from Sophie yourself. Those are the guys you'll have to take a look at potentially for debuts. I think you only said yes to Heilum Lukey, to be fair. So we'll have to wait and see what the sides look like for next year. We've got a whole year to wait before then. But make sure to use your code MOMENTUM for 10% off Breathies and On Track Meals, both of those essential, especially if you're trying to hit your goals before the summer. I know that I am at the moment. On Track Meals is awesome, especially for those tradies out there. You can get little heat packs as well and heat up your food just by shaking it. I think I saw an ad for On Track Meals. So you can get 10% off with the code MOMENTUM and then Breathies. You've seen Jakey wear the nose tape. Sorry, he wouldn't have been wearing the mouth tape on the podcast. The nose tape he's been wearing on the podcast though. And it's really good for in training, for recovery as well, especially for your sleep, just getting the oxygen through the nasal airways, especially if you've got a bit of a crooked nose. You played a bit of rugby league like I have. I know that I've I've got a bit of a crooked nose. Jakey does as well. So it is good for us ex-footy players. But if you are just looking for general improvement in your sleep recovery, then Breathe Easy is perfect for you. Code Momentum for 10% off those. Also, Bear Bet. Bear Bet's a big part of what we do here. Obviously, use those guys for our odds on the podcast. So make sure to jump over to Bear Bet as well for your punting this rugby league season. But for free and confidential support, call 1-800-858-858. Or visit gamblinghelponline.org.au for free and confidential support there. Sophie, pleasure for having you on the podcast yet again. We'll definitely get you back on soon.
Sounds good. Can't wait. Thanks for having me on again. And I'll definitely have to be re-listening to this episode come next Origin series to see if our predictions came true or not.
There you go. See you later, guys.